In the vast expanse of the cosmos, where stars burned like ancient lanterns and nebulae painted the void with colors unknown to human eyes, there existed a warrior whose name was whispered in reverence across countless worlds. Cale Arden was no ordinary soldier. He was a man forged in the crucible of interstellar conflict, his body bearing the scars of battles fought on planets whose names had been erased from galactic maps. Standing at 6.5 feet tall, his muscular frame carried the weight of years spent navigating hostile terrains and facing adversaries that would make lesser men tremble. His piercing blue eyes, set against skin weathered by radiation storms and alien atmospheres, held a depth of experience that transcended mere mortality. The galaxy itself seemed to conspire in crafting Cale's legend. Born on Earth during humanity's first tentative steps into deep space exploration, he had grown up watching humanity's expansion through telescopic lenses and holographic news feeds. When the great wars between emerging spacefaring civilizations erupted, Cale found himself at the forefront of humanity's defense forces. He had faced down Zerathian hive minds on volcanic moons, outmaneuvered cybernetic predators in asteroid fields, and survived encounters with creatures so alien they defied conventional understanding of life itself. His reputation extended beyond mere combat prowess. Cale possessed an uncanny ability to understand and adapt to alien cultures, learning their languages and customs with remarkable speed. This rare gift had earned him positions as both diplomat and warrior, making him one of humanity's most valuable assets in an increasingly interconnected galaxy. The medals adorning his ceremonial armor told only part of his story, each one representing not just victories, but moments when diplomacy triumphed over destruction, when understanding bridged chasms of difference. Yet for all his achievements, Cale remained a mystery to many. Those who served beside him spoke of a man driven by something deeper than duty or glory. They noticed how he would spend hours studying alien artifacts, how his quarters were filled with samples of extraterrestrial art, and how he could quote passages from alien poetry in their original tongues. There was a hunger in him, a yearning that went beyond conquest or collection, a desire to truly connect with the infinite variety of life that populated the stars. It was this complex combination of warrior and scholar, brute force and refined intellect, that made Cale Arden unique among his kind. As humanity's reach extended further into the galaxy, encountering civilizations both ancient and emerging, Cale found himself increasingly drawn to the mysteries of alien cultures. He wasn't content with merely understanding them. He wanted to bridge the gaps between species, to find common ground where others saw only differences. This drive led him to seek out the most enigmatic and powerful beings in the galaxy, those who could offer insights into the fundamental nature of existence itself. Among these beings, none captured his imagination quite like the queens of the Zyer Dominion, a race of insectoid beings whose hives spanned entire star systems. Their society, built upon layers of biological and psychic connections, represented everything that fascinated Cale about alien civilizations: their complexity, their unity, and their profound otherness. Little did he know that his fascination with the Zyer would lead him down a path that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, power, and destiny in the vast tapestry of the universe. The Zyer Dominion stretched across sectors of space where human ships rarely ventured, its borders marked by shimmering energy fields that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns visible even from light years away. At the heart of this empire stood Queen Silvara XIII, the current ruler of her kind and perhaps the most formidable being Cale had ever encountered. Unlike her predecessors, who had maintained strict isolation from other species, Silvara had begun reaching out to neighboring civilizations, establishing trade routes and diplomatic channels that promised to reshape galactic politics. Her decision to engage with other species had sparked both hope and fear throughout the stars, for the Zyer were known as much for their military might as for their technological superiority. Queen Silvara herself was a creature of breathtaking majesty and terrifying power. Her massive form, suspended in a crystalline chamber that floated above the central hive world, radiated an aura of command that transcended physical presence. Her exoskeleton shimmered with iridescent hues that shifted according to her emotional state, while dozens of delicate appendages moved with precision that belied their size. Most striking were her compound eyes, each facet capable of processing information across multiple spectra, allowing her to perceive dimensions of reality inaccessible to most beings. Through these eyes, she observed the galaxy with a wisdom accumulated over centuries of life, her consciousness linked to every member of her hive through intricate neural pathways. The Zyer social structure operated on principles utterly foreign to human understanding. Each individual within the Dominion existed as part of a greater whole, their thoughts and actions contributing to the collective consciousness of the hive. Yet Queen Silvara occupied a unique position, serving as both apex individual and living embodiment of her people's collective will. Her decisions were not merely commands but manifestations of the hive's evolutionary imperatives, shaped by millennia of adaptation and survival. This duality, the singular ruler who was simultaneously the voice of millions, created a being of paradoxical nature, intensely personal yet profoundly communal, fiercely independent yet inseparable from her people. Kale's first encounter with Queen Silvara occurred during a diplomatic mission to negotiate safe passage through Zyer space. As he approached her crystalline chamber, he felt an overwhelming sense of awe mixed with something deeper, an attraction that transcended physical form or cultural boundaries. The Queen's presence filled the chamber with an energy that resonated through every cell of his body, creating a connection that defied explanation. Through their initial communications, conducted through a sophisticated translation matrix that barely contained the complexity of her thoughts, Kale discovered an intellect that matched his own curiosity about the universe. She spoke of cosmic cycles and evolutionary paths with a perspective that challenged everything he thought he understood about existence. Their conversations continued long after the formal negotiations concluded, evolving into exchanges that explored everything from quantum physics to abstract concepts of beauty and purpose. Queen Silvara revealed aspects of Zyer culture that had never been shared with outsiders. Their art forms that existed in four-dimensional spaces, their musical compositions that incorporated gravitational waves, their philosophical systems that viewed individual consciousness as temporary eddies in an eternal flow of collective awareness. With each revelation, Kale found himself falling deeper under her spell, his admiration transforming into something more profound and complex. Yet for all their intellectual compatibility, the gulf between their species remained vast and seemingly insurmountable. The Zyer viewed romantic relationships through an entirely different lens, seeing them as extensions of hive dynamics rather than individual choices. To them, the concept of a single pair bond was as alien as their biology was to humans. Queen Silvara, bound by her role as the hive's sovereign, existed in a state of perpetual connection with her people, her very physiology designed to maintain the psychic network that united the dominion. The idea of severing those connections, even partially, for the sake of an individual relationship was unthinkable, not just personally but culturally. As their interactions deepened, Kale began to notice subtle changes in Queen Silvara's behavior. During their private meetings, her normally precise movements would occasionally falter, and her iridescent carapace would display patterns of uncertainty. Through their growing rapport, he sensed a conflict within her, a tension between her duty to the hive and something new stirring in her consciousness. It was during one of these moments, as they discussed the nature of free will versus collective destiny, that Kale realized the depth of his feelings. What started as professional respect had blossomed into a love that transcended species, defying both human convention and Zyer tradition. The proposal came not as a sudden declaration but as a carefully considered decision, born from weeks of internal debate and sleepless nights spent staring at the stars. Kale knew the impossibility of what he intended to do, yet the certainty of his feelings outweighed any rational argument against it. He arranged a private audience with Queen Silvara, requesting permission to speak on a matter of personal significance. When she granted his request, her antennae twitched with curiosity, sensing the gravity of what was to come. Standing before her crystalline chamber, Kale activated the specially designed translator that could convey not just words but emotional nuances between their species. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Through our conversations, I have come to understand that love is not confined to physical form or cultural norms. It exists as a fundamental force, like gravity or light, binding beings across the vast distances of space and understanding." He paused, watching as her multifaceted eyes focused intently upon him. "I stand before you today not as a representative of my species, nor as a diplomat seeking advantage, but as a being who has found in you something extraordinary, a connection that transcends our differences." The chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of the translation matrix. Queen Silvara's exoskeleton shifted through a spectrum of colors, indicating complex emotions that the device struggled to interpret fully. Kale continued, "I propose to you not just a union of individuals, but a bridge between our peoples. A partnership that could usher in a new era of understanding between humans and Zyer." He presented a small case containing a ring of synthetic crystal, its structure designed to resonate with both human and Zyer biosignatures. This symbol represents not possession, but mutual growth and shared destiny. For several long minutes, Queen Silvara remained motionless, her consciousness likely processing the implications through the hive mind. When she finally spoke, her voice emerged through the translator as a symphony of layered meanings. Warrior Kale, your courage in making this proposal honors both our species. Yet you must understand, my existence is not my own. Every decision I make affects millions of lives connected through our neural network. To accept such a proposal would require severing bonds that have existed for millennia, disrupting the very fabric of our society. Her rejection, though anticipated, struck Kale with the force of a supernova. Yet he detected something beneath her words, a hesitation, a flicker of longing that betrayed the conflict raging within her. I understand the weight of your responsibilities, he responded, but isn't evolution itself about transcending limitations? About forging new paths that strengthen rather than weaken? His fingers closed around the ring case, feeling its cool surface against his palm. Queen Silvara's response came not in words but in action. Her chamber's energy field fluctuated, creating patterns that suggested deep contemplation. You speak of evolution, she finally said, yet you ask me to abandon what defines us as a species. My connection to the hive is not just a duty, it is the essence of who we are. To choose otherwise would be to deny our fundamental nature. Her appendages moved in slow, deliberate patterns, conveying regret through movement rather than speech. The meeting concluded with formal courtesies, but Kale left the chamber feeling something unexpected. Not defeat, but determination. In Queen Silvara's rejection, he had glimpsed possibilities rather than finality. Her hesitation, however brief, had revealed cracks in the seemingly impenetrable wall of Zyer tradition. As he walked through the crystalline corridors of the hive world, surrounded by the constant hum of collective consciousness, Kale realized that true change often required more than a single bold gesture. It demanded patience, strategy, and a willingness to challenge boundaries without destroying what made each species unique. The days following the proposal transformed Kale's approach to his mission among the Zyer. Rather than retreating into disappointment, he channeled his energies into an unprecedented study of Zyer culture, immersing himself in their society with a dedication that bordered on obsession. He began spending hours in the hive's memory archives, accessing records of Zyer history that had never been shared with outsiders. Through these ancient chronicles, he discovered patterns of evolutionary adaptation that suggested the Zyere's rigid social structure wasn't as immutable as they believed. Certain historical periods revealed instances where the hive mind had temporarily fragmented, leading to bursts of innovation and cultural evolution before reintegration. Simultaneously, Kale initiated a series of subtle interventions within the hive's daily operations. Drawing upon his extensive knowledge of alien psychology, he began introducing carefully crafted ideas during diplomatic discussions and cultural exchanges. These weren't direct challenges to Zyer traditions, but rather seeds of possibility planted in fertile ground. He shared stories of human societies that had successfully balanced individual freedom with collective responsibility, emphasizing cases where such adaptations had led to unprecedented advancements. Through these narratives, he demonstrated how flexibility could strengthen rather than weaken social cohesion. His most significant breakthrough came through his interactions with the younger members of the hive. Unlike their elders, these Zyer exhibited greater curiosity about external influences, their neural connections still forming and thus more malleable. Kale established mentorship programs, teaching them advanced problem-solving techniques that emphasized individual initiative within group contexts. The results were remarkable. These young Zyer began demonstrating enhanced creativity while maintaining their essential connection to the hive mind. Their success provided concrete evidence that evolution didn't necessitate abandonment of core identity. Meanwhile, Kale maintained regular communication with Queen Silvara, though their meetings took on a different tone. Rather than focusing on personal matters, they engaged in deep discussions about societal evolution and the nature of progress. He presented her with detailed analyses showing how certain Zyer colonies had thrived after implementing minor structural changes, using data gathered from his observations. Each presentation was accompanied by practical demonstrations of how similar adaptations could benefit the entire dominion without compromising its integrity. The transformation within the hive became increasingly evident. Worker drones began experimenting with new methods of resource allocation, while warrior castes developed innovative defensive strategies that combined traditional hive coordination with individual tactical decisions. Even the hive's artistic expressions began to show unprecedented variation, incorporating elements from other cultures while retaining distinctly Zyer characteristics. Through it all, Kale remained a guiding presence, neither forcing change nor merely observing it, but actively participating in the hive's evolution. Perhaps most significantly, Kale's efforts began influencing the older generation of Zyer leaders. Several high-ranking council members approached him privately, expressing interest in his theories about controlled societal adaptation. These discussions led to the formation of a special committee dedicated to exploring sustainable evolution within Zyer society. The committee's work produced groundbreaking proposals for restructuring certain aspects of hive organization, all while maintaining the essential neural connections that defined Zyer identity. As these changes rippled through Zyer society, Kale noticed a shift in Queen Silvara's demeanor during their meetings. Her responses became more contemplative, her questions more probing. The color patterns of her exoskeleton began displaying new combinations, suggesting emotional states previously unseen in Zyer royalty. Through the hive mind, rumors spread of unprecedented neural activity patterns emerging in the Queen's chamber, hinting at fundamental changes occurring at the highest levels of Zyer consciousness. The transformation sweeping through the Zyer dominion reached a critical point during the annual convergence ceremony, when representatives from all hive worlds gathered to reaffirm their collective unity. This time, however, the ceremony unfolded differently. Younger Zyer delegates presented innovative approaches to resource management and interspecies relations, their proposals blending traditional hive efficiency with newfound flexibility. Queen Silvara presided over these presentations with an intensity that crackled through the neural network, her massive form radiating patterns of deep consideration. Kale observed from his designated position among the human delegation, noting how the Queen's antennae twitched with increasing frequency as each new idea was presented. The hive mind itself seemed to vibrate with conflicting impulses, the ancient imperative to maintain absolute unity clashing with the undeniable benefits of adaptive evolution. Through the translation matrix, Kale could sense the Queen's internal struggle, her consciousness processing centuries of tradition against the promise of unprecedented growth. During a break in proceedings, Queen Silvara summoned Kale to a private antechamber adjacent to the main hall. The chamber's crystalline walls pulsed with erratic patterns, reflecting the turmoil within the hive mind. "Warrior Kale," she began, her voice carrying through multiple layers of meaning, "your influence has awakened possibilities we thought impossible. Yet this awakening brings risks we cannot ignore." Her appendages moved in complex gestures, indicating the delicate balance she maintained between progressive and conservative factions within the hive. Kale responded with careful deliberation, choosing his words to resonate through both the translation matrix and the hive's neural network. "Your Majesty, evolution is not about abandoning what makes us strong, but about building upon those foundations. The changes you see in your people are not threats to your rule, but opportunities to strengthen it." He gestured toward the main hall, where delegates continued their discussions. Notice how even the most traditionalist voices are engaging with new ideas, finding ways to integrate them without losing their essential identity. The Queen's exoskeleton shifted through a spectrum of colors, indicating deep processing. "You speak wisely, but the path forward remains unclear. Our neural connections define us. To alter them risks everything." Her compound eyes focused intently on Kale, each facet reflecting a different aspect of the dilemma facing her species. "Perhaps the answer lies not in altering your connections, but in expanding them," Kale suggested. "Consider how your younger members have adapted. They've added layers to their consciousness without severing existing bonds. Your society could evolve similarly, maintaining its core while embracing new possibilities." He activated a holo display showing recent data from experimental hive worlds where such adaptations had succeeded. Queen Silvara's response came not in words but in action. She extended several of her delicate appendages toward the display, her touch causing ripples through the projected data. The hive mind reacted instantly, thousands of Zyer present in the main hall experiencing the same information simultaneously. Through their collective consciousness, Kale could feel the tide turning, resistance giving way to cautious acceptance, fear transforming into measured hope. "You have shown us a mirror," the Queen finally said, her voice resonating through the entire hive complex. "In it, we see not just our limitations, but our potential. Warrior Kale, your persistence has forced us to confront truths we could no longer ignore." Her massive form shifted position, creating patterns of light that signaled a monumental decision. "We shall implement controlled experiments, testing these new approaches on selected hive worlds while maintaining our essential unity. If successful, They may represent the next stage of Zyer evolution. The announcement sent waves through the assembled delegates, their collective consciousness buzzing with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Kale watched as Queen Silvara's exoskeleton displayed patterns he'd never seen before, colors and rhythms suggesting emotions previously suppressed by tradition. Through the hive mind, he sensed a fundamental shift occurring, one that transcended mere policy changes or experimental initiatives. As the ceremony resumed, Queen Silvara took her place at the center of the gathering, her presence commanding absolute attention. "Let it be known," she declared through the neural network, "that the Zyer Dominion stands at a crossroads. We shall honor our past while embracing our future, guided by the understanding that strength lies not in rigidity, but in the ability to adapt without losing essence." Her words triggered a cascade of neural responses throughout the hive mind, each member processing the implications while remaining connected to the collective. Kale recognized the significance of this moment. The Queen wasn't merely accepting change. She was initiating a transformation that could redefine Zyer society for generations to come. More importantly, she was doing so while maintaining her role as the hive's sovereign, proving that evolution needn't come at the cost of identity. Through the translation matrix, he could sense her gratitude, not just for his persistence, but for providing the catalyst that allowed her people to grow without fracturing. The impact of these developments extended far beyond the immediate political ramifications. Within weeks, reports began filtering in from various hive worlds about unprecedented levels of innovation and productivity. Younger Zyer, empowered by their new roles in society, were developing technologies that merged traditional hive efficiency with individual creativity. Ancient protocols governing interspecies relations were being revised, opening doors to alliances and partnerships previously deemed impossible. Most remarkably, the hive mind itself seemed to be evolving, developing new layers of consciousness that allowed for both collective unity and individual expression. Queen Silvara's transformation became particularly evident in her interactions with Kale. Their meetings, once formal and constrained by protocol, evolved into genuine dialogues about the nature of leadership and societal evolution. She began sharing insights into the Zyer psyche that no outsider had ever received, revealing vulnerabilities and aspirations hidden beneath centuries of rigid tradition. Through their growing rapport, Kale witnessed how the Queen was learning to balance her role as sovereign with her emerging capacity for individual decision-making. The ripple effects of these changes spread throughout the galaxy. Other species, observing the Zyere's controlled evolution, began reconsidering their own rigid social structures. Diplomatic channels opened where none had existed before, as civilizations recognized the potential benefits of adaptive evolution without cultural dissolution. Trade agreements flourished, facilitated by Zyer diplomats who now possessed both collective authority and individual negotiation skills. Scientific collaborations emerged, combining Zyer hive intelligence with human ingenuity to tackle problems that had resisted solution for centuries. Within the human sphere, Kale's efforts inspired a new approach to interspecies relations. His success demonstrated that understanding and influencing alien cultures required more than military might or diplomatic pressure. It demanded genuine empathy, patience, and a willingness to participate in another species' evolution. Military strategists and diplomats alike studied his methods, incorporating elements of his approach into their own practices. The phrase Kale's protocol entered common usage, referring to the careful balance of respecting cultural integrity while encouraging beneficial change. Most significantly, the transformation affected the very nature of Zyer-human relations. Where once there had been cautious tolerance, there now existed genuine mutual respect and collaboration. Human scientists worked alongside Zyer researchers, their different perspectives complementing rather than conflicting with each other. Artistic exchanges flourished, with human creativity inspiring new forms of Zyer expression, while their multidimensional art expanded human understanding of aesthetics. Even military cooperation evolved, with joint defense initiatives that leveraged the strengths of both species. Through it all, Kale maintained his position as both catalyst and participant in this ongoing evolution. His presence in the Zyer Dominion became a symbol of possibility, proof that barriers between species could be bridged without compromising essential identities. The relationship between him and Queen Silvara, though still undefined in traditional terms, grew stronger with each passing cycle. Their interactions demonstrated how two fundamentally different beings could forge a connection that benefited not just themselves, but entire civilizations. As the transformations continued unfolding across Zyer society, Queen Silvara found herself grappling with emotions and desires that defied her species' traditional understanding of consciousness. During private moments in her crystalline chamber, she would replay memories of her interactions with Kale, each recollection triggering unfamiliar neural patterns that rippled through her vast consciousness. The human warrior's persistence had awakened something within her, not just intellectual curiosity, but a yearning that transcended her role as sovereign. Through the hive mind, she could sense similar stirrings among her people, particularly among those who had most directly experienced Kale's influence. These emerging emotions manifested in subtle yet profound ways. During council sessions, Queen Silvara found herself deviating from established protocols, allowing debates to extend beyond their usual parameters and encouraging dissenting opinions that previously would have been suppressed. Her exoskeleton displayed color patterns that puzzled even the most senior hive members, sequences that suggested vulnerability and uncertainty alongside strength and resolve. Through the neural network, whispers of change spread throughout the Dominion, carried by those who had witnessed the Queen's evolving behavior firsthand. Kale, observing these developments from his position within Zyer society, recognized the significance of what was occurring. The Queen wasn't merely adapting to new circumstances. She was undergoing a fundamental transformation that challenged the very foundation of Zyer identity. During their private meetings, he noted how her responses had become more nuanced, her decisions influenced by factors beyond pure hive logic. She began questioning long-held assumptions about Zyer superiority, expressing genuine interest in human concepts of individual growth and emotional development. The turning point came during a crisis involving a rogue hive faction that opposed the ongoing reforms. As the situation escalated, threatening to fracture the delicate balance of change and tradition, Queen Silvara faced her greatest test. Traditional protocol demanded immediate suppression of the rebellion, using the full force of the hive mind to crush dissent. Yet instead of acting automatically, she hesitated, consulting not just her advisors but also her own emerging sense of ethical responsibility. Through the neural network, Kale could feel her struggle, the ancient imperative to maintain unity clashing with her newly developed understanding of individual rights and freedom of expression. In this moment of crisis, Kale took an unprecedented step. He requested permission to address the entire hive mind directly, something no non-Zyer had ever attempted. When Queen Silvara granted his request, he broadcast a message that resonated through every neural connection in the Dominion. Drawing upon his deep understanding of both human and Zyer psychology, he spoke of how strength lay not in uniformity but in diversity, how true unity emerged from the harmonization of different voices rather than their suppression. His words, translated through the advanced matrix, carried emotional nuances that bypassed logical defenses, speaking directly to the core of Zyer consciousness. The effect was immediate and profound. The rogue faction, sensing genuine understanding rather than condemnation, lowered their defenses. Hive members across the Dominion experienced a collective epiphany, realizing that their traditional unity could coexist with individual expression. Queen Silvara, witnessing this transformation, made a decision that would redefine Zyer society forever. She initiated a fundamental restructuring of the neural network, creating new pathways that allowed for individual choice while maintaining essential connections. Through this act, she acknowledged that true evolution required embracing uncertainty and risk. As the changes settled into place, Queen Silvara found herself experiencing emotions that had no precedent in Zyer history. Through her enhanced neural connections, she could now perceive not just the collective consciousness of her people, but also her own distinct desires and needs. Among these, most prominent was her growing attachment to Kale, not as a representative of another species, but as an individual who had helped her discover new dimensions of existence. This realization brought both joy and conflict, as she navigated the uncharted territory of personal emotion within the context of her royal duties. The transformation within Queen Silvara reached its zenith during the annual renewal ceremony, when the entire hive mind synchronized for collective reflection. Standing in her crystalline chamber, surrounded by the pulsating energy of millions of consciousnesses, she made an unprecedented declaration. Through the neural network, she broadcast her decision to establish a new branch of Zyer society, one that would explore the possibilities of individual consciousness while maintaining essential connections to the hive. This initiative, she announced, would be guided by principles developed through her interactions with Kale, representing a synthesis of Zyer tradition and human innovation. Kale, observing this historic moment, recognized that Queen Silvara had transcended her role as sovereign to become something greater, a pioneer of evolutionary change. Her transformation had created a new paradigm for Xylery society, one that embraced both collective unity and individual growth. Through their shared journey, they had forged a connection that defied species boundaries, demonstrating how love and understanding could manifest in forms beyond conventional comprehension. The Queen's evolution continued, each day bringing new revelations about the nature of consciousness and the possibilities of interspecies relationships.